it's easier to be the devil in the midst of angels than an angel in the midst of devils. And what that essentially means is like children really have no other choice but to internalize like what they're experiencing and receiving from their environment around them. So for many little girls, and this was true for me, the only choice was to go, oh, there's something wrong with me. But even more specifically than that, the problem is my body, because it's the only thing that's changed.
Welcome. I'm Andy Carlson, and you're listening to the Time with Tim podcast. Each episode, we explore the impact of complex trauma through the personal journeys of our guests. Along the way, we'll connect with experts and individuals who share their unique perspectives, insights, and practical tools to help you on your healing journey. Hey everyone, and welcome back to Time with Tim. I'm Andy Carlson, joined by Tim Fletcher, and today we're sitting down with Jamie Lee Finch. Jamie is a writer, educator, and embodiment coach. She helps people transform how they relate to their bodies, not as objects to control or fix, but as living, breathing partners. Her journey began in the world of authoritarian religion, where she learned to disconnect from herself in the name of being good. Today, Jamie's work is rooted in compassion, agency, and deep reconnection with the self. Jamie, we're so grateful to have you here today.
Thank you.
And so we'd love to begin with your story. And so if you wouldn't mind to just take us back to the earliest years and share what your childhood looked like.
First of all, I want to say I don't exactly know why, but hearing you give that introduction made me pretty emotional all of a sudden. I think if I were to guess, it's just this enormous amount of gratitude I feel for being on this path of reconciliation with the body, and being someone who gets the incredible gift of living in partnership with her, and it's just it's the greatest feeling in the world. So yeah, I think that's what was coming up. There's like, wow, that's all, everything he's saying is true. I've done we've been there. We did that. Wow. And to take it and anchor that into the context of my journey is something that's, I think, quite fascinating about me and my ability to answer those kinds of questions is that I actually have over 100 hours of video footage of my own development, because my dad got a camcorder in the late 80s and went pretty ham with it, and for good reason. His parents, my paternal grandparents, I was born in New Jersey, but I was raised in Missouri. My dad's from Texas, and it was, I was their first biological grandchild, and they really wanted to be a part of my life somehow. But them coming to us coming to them was just quite a tall order. And so he would record these videos on VHS tapes and put the tapes in the mail. And so, I mean, I have everything from a couple of years before I entered into my family. So I can see what the family unit was like. There's my mother and my siblings who are her children from her first marriage. And then, so I'm observing my dad as a step parent, which is fascinating now that I am one. Just, we can put a pin in that, maybe come back to it later. It's incredible. And then I'm seeing them like getting ready and excited for me. And then I literally have a video of 4 a.m, my parents set up the recorder on a tripod, and my dad's wearing a suit, and my mom's got her big belly, and they're going to the appointment to, have the surgery for me to get. And then the video of my birth, I have the whole video of my birth. And then I have so much footage from everything that comes after that. So as a somatic facilitator, this is excellent because I have gotten the opportunity to view some raw footage of what my body was experiencing. And I don't have to simply attempt to rely on memory. And even as we know in developmental psychology, there's so much that is largely inaccessible to conscious memory in the first roughly 7 years of development, and then much less in utero, where your conscious mind is not totally online yet. So all you are is really just living matter that is like absorbing and emitting, which is a huge component in my work, is teaching people that reality about their body's experience. So what I know about my body's experience and my experience is that it was quite a mixed bag, like everyone's is kind of what you sign up for in the human journey, the human path. I have two incredible parents who vastly improved on the model of what they were given and what they were raised with, who showed up to the best of their ability in my life and in, well, first and foremost in the life of each other, and then in my life. And there were certain things that they couldn't quite get to within themselves to be able to offer their full presence to themselves, to each other, and then to myself. And if I might be so bold to speak on behalf of my siblings as well. And I think that that's usually the best way of understanding like the breakdown of what happens in our development as humans who get scared and cannot continue to offer full presence. And so I had that journey as well. And was also raised inside of the fundamentalist evangelical Christian church, which I'm extraordinarily grateful now, like just being given that initial framework of there is a divine presence and it is interested in being in relationship with you. Like, oh, I can't imagine my life had that not been formed in my unconscious. And there were some really complex narratives that came along with that regarding who and how I was overtly told or what was covertly implied of who and how I needed to be. As you said, Andy, like in order to be good, which really is the price of belonging, is you have to be good to belong, especially when you're a little girl. And in many ways, nobody really looked me in the eye and told me that, and then told me to stop being who I was. But there were those subtle, largely unintentional messages. Everyone thought they were doing their best to save me and make me well. And I fell into line because that's all you can kind of do when you're a little one. And started on this path of really just like forgetting, but not knowing that I was forgetting. And, I could touch on all the milestones, childhood, adolescence, and beyond, but I'll just kind of speed us up to the early iteration of my public-facing work. I was definitely still a person who was forgetting, and I didn't know that I was forgetting. And so the way in which I was showing up to a lot of podcast interviews specifically, like you can go back and listen to anything that has me as a guest on it from 2017 to 2021, and you'll hear an entirely different person with an entirely different nervous system who also was doing an excellent job with what she had to work with at the time, and also was doing good too, which I think is that's I think my definition of grace now. That in spite of myself, there was still like love was still able to get through. And I was really suffering in ways that I was trying to outrun the acknowledgement of. And there are many things that contributed to my slowing down and catching up to myself, and to the God of my understanding, and to the incredible loving partner that is my body. And we might be able to get into what some of those things have been as we continue in our conversation. But at this point, I would say, if I were to identify myself in some way, I made this not joke on my podcast, Experiential Anatomy, that I actually don't have a commitment to an identity anymore. I'm kind of just like interested in being here and seeing what emerges. And if I were to tiptoe in the direction of any kind of identity, I think I am just a consciousness animated into living matter that mostly wants to exist as often as I possibly can, in a relaxed state of gratitude, because I believe that is the state that makes my body the most well. And there's so much that I don't know But the one thing I know is that I have a body and that she has always been for me. And so I always want to be for her. And if that is the state that makes her most well, I'm committed to moving anything and everything that's in my consciousness out of the way so that she can be as well as she came here to be.
And I just make a couple of comments just because
we're having a conversation.
Yeah,
so please do.
You said that so beautifully. Just a couple of things that I wanted to highlight and then ask a question. So to me, what I think stands out that a lot of people don't realize if you're raised within kind of high control religious culture is there's so many things that aren't said, but as a child, you just pick up.
Absolutely.
You just know. Nobody has to tell you. You pick it up. And then you get validated by conforming, for conforming. And so you become great at conforming to what people pleasing, whatever they want. So you're almost trained to be a fawner, to be codependent, to put your needs aside. But more than that, you're told who you are and what you're supposed to be, role-wise, all of that. So you're not to the full extent, like many parents allow you to some extent to explore your personality and your gifts and your passions, but there's a certain kind of overriding, but this is who you are, that has to then kind of limit that to a degree.
Yeah. You can explore, but inside of these constraints.
This box here. Yeah. Exactly. Yeah. So what stood out to me as you were sharing, Jamie, is you grew up in that, I grew up in that, but you grew up as a girl, I grew up as a guy. And I think it was harder for girls. There were more constraints. There were more, it was almost like the role was more rigid and cast for the girls than it was for the guys. Can you just talk about that, what it was like being a girl?
Yeah. The first thing that comes to mind is, I would guess, again, because I only had my experience and I didn't have the experience of a boy, but I very much remember, like somatically remember mostly, how frequently it was put to me covertly, occasionally overtly as you get older, but like this covert, like it's just the water you're swimming in, like there's something dangerous, like inherently dangerous, and it about your body, and it's really difficult too because it kind of just comes on seemingly out of nowhere, because you're just like a little girl who gets to like be super free, and then at some undefined moment of your development that you can't keep from happening, it's just going to happen to you, you are interacted with by some of the same people who used to like hold your gaze and be with you very freely. You're interacted with at like this like distanced sort of way. And I heard this phrase many years ago that is a phrase that's used in like child development psychology, which is that it's easier to be the devil in the midst of angels than an angel in the midst of devils. And what that essentially means is like children really have no other choice but to internalize like what they're experiencing and receiving from their environment around them. So for many little girls, and this was true for me, the only choice was to go, oh, there's something wrong with me. But even more specifically than that, the problem is my body, because it's the only thing that's changed. And it hasn't really changed, but it's changed in the sense that I don't use it words for the body anymore, but I think in this context it makes sense just to speak to that previous, mindset. But she is growing. That's all that is going on. I'm growing, I'm expanding, I'm blossoming, I'm blooming, I am feeling all these sensations and feelings and emotions, and at this really pivotal moment of what deserves to be kind of the exploration of self and the greater exploration of the world. Exactly as you're saying, there's these covert messages that we absorb from our environments that request of us to do the exact opposite, which is not only to close off from the world around us because we're dangerous, but what ends up happening so often is that we close off to our own bodies. We close off to ourselves, but again, more specifically, this rift happens in our relationship with our bodies. I'm one of the many facilitations I do now is I'm a sober sitter for full dose psilocybin journeys. And I recently had a client that I was working with at this exact, like, at 12 was the moment of breaking between her and her body for the purity culture reasons, and how from that point that schism started, and it's just been this, these lines that just keep getting further and further away from each other ever since. But she was sharing both during her journey and then in the processing after some really specific memories that were coming up for her about what was happening, yes, but mostly the way it felt to have to try and figure out how to exist under all of that. And the smartest survival strategy is self-abandonment. When you're faced with that impossible challenge of, like, somehow continue to exist as a person, but not like that. Well, I can't help it like this. So yeah, there's on some level it's unavoidable to end up experiencing that schism between mind and body.
Exactly. So three different directions I want to go here. So let me just itemize them. So part of what we know in the world of complex trauma is that for most people, complex trauma starts at a pre-verbal stage of life. So in utero, before they can talk.
Yeah.
And so the brain can't process the trauma, so it stores it in the body. So you've got trauma stored in the body, but because you can't resolve any of the trauma pain and the body pain that's happening, you start to abandon your emotions, you disconnect from your emotions, you disconnect from your body, you just escape into your head or dissociate totally. And so the healing is the reconnected. So that's just the trauma piece. Then to me, when you get to some of the religious piece, where I'd like to ask you about is some of the messages, if you were to put them into words that kind of told you your body was bad, pleasure is dangerous, your body is dangerous, and created this fear environment, and a very negative, restrictive environment. You can no longer be you. You got to wear certain clothes now because you're going to be tempting men. So in a patriarchal culture, it's always the women's fault, all of that kind of messaging. So then the third thing, if you can keep track of all of this, is did you go through kind of stage of body dysmorphia, hating your body, suicidal, all of those different types of things, eating disorders?
Yes.
So you go wherever you want there.
Yeah. Yes, I did. I did, definitely. And I've gotten over the past few years a lot braver and bolder about, like, telling the truth about the fact that the work of embodiment, however you find it, but just to speak to, like, the methodology that I've created of personified embodiment and learning how to regard your body as a living being that you're in relationship with, enacting that process, self-facilitating that process, and then also partnering with facilitators who could help me strengthen my ability to self-facilitate that process, is what healed my 15-year-long eating disorder when nothing else would work. And there's a lot to say about, the specifics of that journey. And I'm happy to share that with anyone who, reaches out, wants to know, or wants to work with me. But absolutely, I had what I didn't know it was body dysmorphia. I didn't know it was an eating disorder. I didn't until I did. It was just the natural, unfortunately, like, natural sort of outcome or results of it was the external expressing the internal of this rift, of this difficulty, of this desperate need to get out of here somehow, and then the anxiety and the tension that exists because you can't fully get out of here. And for me and many of the people I've worked with over the last 9 years, the majority of which I would say are women, but I work with people of all genders. I wrote some things down while you were articulating the, like, what's the covert messaging, or if you were to put language to what you're absorbing in your environment, that's sort of asking to demanding you to go through this process of self-abandonment. What is it that is being risked, essentially? I would say that the way it felt for me, and what I've heard articulated from hundreds of people, is that it was this feeling, and the feeling is all you need. It was the feeling that if I don't figure out how to be good in spite of myself, if I don't figure out how to be perfect in spite of my humanity, in spite of my body, I will lose belonging. And in losing belonging, there is something, to that idea of like the safety of existing within the tribe. And that's like, evolutionary psychology. It's appropriate development. But even more specifically in my work as of late, I've been really mapping like attachment theory over everything. And in particular, because my path is blossoming and unfolding in the direction of becoming a mother. And I've been thinking so much about mothering and remothering. And the primary work of mothering, and we could expand this out to just say parenting, is to offer your full gaze, your unmitigated gaze, and your complete and full presence to your child. And everything flows from that. And so that is what is vital for survival. And that is what is felt by the developing child, if it is there and if it is not there. And in fact, that is all that's going on, is whether or not the unmitigated gaze and the full attentive presence is there. If it's not there, we're seeking that all the time. And we are, from day zero, we are compensating in somatic, not thought-based, but just like automatic somatic ways. We are compensating to try and figure out how to get that gaze back on us, how to negotiate that presence back in our direction. And so what I would say is that what I understand now is it definitely was this feeling of, unless I solve this unsolvable problem, I will lose belonging. But it was more specifically this like feeling that I needed to get back the feeling of having the full gaze of unconditional love pointed in my direction. And that was what manifested such a complicated relationship between me and God. As I talk about in my book, I needed God to be on my team because I didn't feel like I had anyone else on my team. But like the rules were tough and confusing, because it was both like, he loves you no matter what, but only if you do this stuff. And so again, that creates like such a specific tension in the body, when really all I wanted was union. Of course, that's all I wanted. That's the blueprint of the somatic system, is union with unconditional love and unlimited resourcing. That is the blueprint of a body. And for many reasons, I did not have that. I couldn't quite get to that. So I was seeking that out in everything I was doing. And in many ways, the things I wasn't doing, the things I wasn't allowing myself to do, and who I wasn't allowing myself to be.
So just if I can share something from my perspective, but my story as well. Like, to me, the attachment theory becomes that fundamental, that's the first driving need of an infant, because if you don't connect, you die.
Yes.
You're totally
right.
dependent.
Yep.
And so you're driven to connect. So your whole radar system, kind of all of your vagus nerve, is your interoception is sensing, can I connect to this person?
Yes, that's right.
And
connection available to me here.
Exactly.
Yes.
And if I'm not feeling I can connect, then it must be my fault. So I need to adapt and do something different. Like you say, it's purely automatic response. I need to switch and try something else, because I got to have connection. Yes. And so once your body changes and all of a sudden people are looking at you differently, and they're judging you now, you're desperately going, well, how do I get the connection back? Now I got to earn connection. It's not unconditional anymore. And that's traumatic to the nervous system. Absolutely. For a child, especially. Okay. So I just remember way back, like once you start to kind of know all of this stuff, you sift back through all the memories of your childhood. And I sift back to early in life, what I sensed with certain people. And it was just like, I would send out almost like a tentacle.
Yes,
and
that's
sense,
right.
can I connect to this person or not?
Yeah.
And I knew, and I have vivid body memories that I can't connect with this person. They're not safe. They're not available. They're not present.
Yeah. Yes.
And it's like, whoa, I just wanted that person to be present and safe. That was what my nervous system needed, longed for, and it had to be an unconditional. I didn't have to earn it. And so that's to me what you're saying. Okay, if I can branch here a little wee bit.
Mm-hmm.
So we've been focusing on the body, but I think there's another piece. Well, there's two pieces to me that women have to deal with, but they come out of kind of a religious context, and that becomes sex and pleasure. So it's not just your body that's a problem. It's now sex is an issue, and now sex is dangerous. Sex is potentially bad. And then pleasure. Well, you got, it's okay, but not too much. And so pleasure is suspect. So again, to me, for a woman, that even is magnified. How the messages get sent to women. Would you mind just kind of speaking into that a little bit?
Yeah, it's extraordinarily developmentally confusing because, and again, this is something that came up in that recent facilitation. As my client was kind of working through and weaving back together her understanding of like what has sort of laid the groundwork or defined the relationship she's largely had with her body. One of the things we found ourselves talking through was the specificity of like how this manifested with like sexuality and like sexual urges, drives, desires, and how it is it is irreducible to human development.
Exactly.
Like there's no way to turn that off once it comes on. But again, what you're being met with from these external sources who probably even largely don't know that they're meeting you with this is like, turn it off. Figure out how to turn it off. And then we will recognize you as safe. We will recognize you as good. Then you will belong. And then you will get my gaze.
Yes.
And so there's something so inhumane, something so just, it's like a puzzle that can't be solved when you're trying to figure out how to shut down what tens of hundreds, maybe thousands of years of evolution has been like, this kind of needs to be on, this light switch needs to be on. But you're like wrestling with it, thinking that maybe you can just figure out how to like hack it and turn it off. And the stakes feel high. Like the stakes feel really, really high to figure out how to do that, because it is like the present moment belonging, but also like how your future unfolds is really kind of on the chopping block of whether or not you figure this out. Because that's a lot of what I really vividly remember about the messaging I absorbed regarding my relationship to like sexuality, sex, pleasure, is if you don't figure this out and walk it perfectly, there will be consequences both in this lifetime and possibly the next, though you're mostly like saved from the consequences of the next lifetime. So it's really just this one you have to worry about. But I have so many vivid memories of just the constricting terror of, if I don't walk this out appropriately, God's going to punish me in some way. Okay, the main one I had was specifically, it was God is going to force me to marry someone I don't like. And who knows where specifically, I think maybe that was because a lot of the adults I was in the presence of, my parents included, like didn't seem to really like each other that much. And so it was like, okay, I'm trying to figure this out and square this. But for me, it was very much in one way or another. If I cannot figure out how to successfully shut down my sexuality until I am inside of a sanctioned, arrangement and moment to allow that to be turned back on for me, I might never find myself in that sanctioned, situation, environment, or I will destroy myself in some way. I will lose value in some way. Both in general as a person, and also kind of in like this sexual marketplace, like, or that, I won't be marriage material, and then what? Then I'll just, so it just, there's a huge spiral there. And the other thing I want to speak to as well is this idea of like pleasure being suspect. And I do think a lot of times when we're talking about the body and sexuality, what we're talking about when we talk about pleasure is kind of like one's relationship to one's own body sexually, like sexual self-pleasure, which is, definitely off the table. But lately I've been really working with this idea of just how much delight across the board has to kind of go when you go from girlhood into your adolescence. Your ability to just freely embody delight at all becomes suspect inside of that environment. And I would even say not just inside of fundamentalist religious contexts, but culturally in the West. I think that that's something, and I haven't quite ideated this through enough to be able to speak on it super confidently. I just feel the truth of it in my own body and in my lived experience, that it wasn't just the idea of masturbation or self-pleasure that was off the table. It was really becoming suspicious in my own direction about anything that brought me delight. And I was sharing with a client a couple weeks ago that one of my compensatory strategies for that was learning how to pivot immediately and quickly, like immediately and very successfully, like practicing the pivot. So it wasn't, for some people, they dissociate to where they can't even get access to what feels pleasurable and delightful. For me, it was, at first at least, until I practiced it enough that I started to lose the ability to access it. But right at first, it was more this, like, I could identify what brought me delight, or I could identify what I wanted, or what was starting to kind of stoke the response of pleasure in me. And I would immediately shut that down. It was just this practice motion of, you can't go there, it's dangerous. And then
would you go to guilt?
Oh, yes. Yeah. And guilt, more shame, more like this specific somatic sensation of shame, which they're quite similar. Usually guilt would lead to the shame. It'd be like, oh no, I did something wrong. Well, that's because I am someone wrong, because my core is wrong. So yeah, it's just, you spiral all the way down. Yeah. And then you learn to innately associate somatic experiences of pleasure and delight with shame right away.
Exactly. So if I can just talk to two things. So I think, first of all, just if you look back on kind of all you've said so far, and you've internalized all these messages about your body, about all of that, all of the messages, the sum total is, you used to be good enough, but now you're not good enough. Yeah. You now have to earn it by being good. And so the belief that develops inside is, okay, then shame, core belief that I am not good enough, that I am flawed, wrong, bad, less than, all of that. So that shame is the ultimate kind of belief system that comes out of all of that upbringing. Mm-hmm. Okay, so if I can just, what you were saying, you were wanting to ideate but weren't feeling confident enough to really do it yet. If I can just give my 2 cents that to add to your kind of mixing pot in your brain. To me, there's a couple things that happen within cultures, within religious organizations, but there's a certain amount of an indoctrination. So it's the water you swim in, mm-hmm. but you're trained to think a certain way. You're trained to have certain biases and perspectives. But then there's also within high control religions a gaslighting that happens. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. So your gut tells you something and you're told you're wrong. That's not the way it is. It's this way. And so you live with this cognitive dissonance now, where my body's telling me one thing, but my authority figures are telling me the opposite.
Yes.
I don't like this internal mental tension. So let's just shut down. Whenever I feel cognitive dissonance, don't pay attention to it, shut it off, and just conform.
Path of
And
least resistance is just truth be told.
exactly.
Yeah.
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 So you learn to shut down a whole bunch of critical thinking, learning to listen to your gut, your body, learning to voice stuff, because that's, especially if it's contradictory, learning to ask questions, all of those systems start to get shut down because they're dangerous and they're going to get you in trouble. And so I think culturally, like, take religion out of it, culturally that's true. Especially shame-based cultures where you better conform to the way we do things around here, the social etiquette, or else you're going to make us look bad as a family. You're going to get us in trouble. You're bad if you do that. And then there's all the shaming your messages and fear messages to try to get you to conform. So I was thinking of, when you were sharing, my wife sharing with me, growing up in a similar upbringing, when she hit puberty and her body starting to develop, that her dad's big fear, because she's very pretty, was that she was going to lose her virginity. And so his only way, he couldn't trust that he had given them enough tools and support that they would want to do the right thing, because they had to stay pure till they were married in that culture. And so his only recourse was to pour fear into them and to use God and religion to create extra fear that you better not err in this area, or else you're going to be not just in trouble with me, but with God. And then in the church system, the only time they did excommunications and church discipline was if somebody erred sexually. It wasn't if you overate. It wasn't if it was just sexual. So there was just this constant fear message that, again, I think from my wife, you get bodily sensations when you think back to some of that. Like, it was powerful.
Yes. Yeah. The programming goes really deep. One of the things I talk a lot about in my work is that, one of my core foundational beliefs about, like, the way the body works and the way the dance of consciousness partnered with living matter just kind of works in the human experience, is that what we are always doing until we learn how to stop doing it, if we learn how to stop doing it, if we take that path of development and maturation towards wholeness and presence, what we're always doing is unconsciously seeking our most familiar somatic state.
Exactly.
And everything that you just described, like, I think for everyone inside of fundamentalist religious environments and also outside of them, I think for everyone who exists in, the Western modern culture for myriad reasons, that all have different tones and expressions to them and different, signatures to them. I think the most familiar somatic state for the vast majority of us, when it comes back to what we internalized wordlessly in our developmental experience, is the state of shame. And I don't know if you're familiar with Carolyn Lovewell's work with existential kink, but that expression of, like, shadow work, basically, of figuring out how to excavate lovingly, gently, consciously, compassionately, excavate those parts that are desperately trying to cling to that most familiar somatic state of shame, and beginning to work with those as allies through understanding in order to grow and set yourself free. But when we come to understand that everything that we're doing until we learn how to stop doing it is unconsciously seeking our most familiar somatic state, so much of our behavior in adolescence and adulthood starts to make deep sense to us. And my theory is that the most appropriate response then is compassion in the direction of self, not trying to control your programming or bully your programming into doing something different, because that just reinforces the shame state. Somatically, that when you are yelling at someone, telling them what to do, or let's put it this way, if someone's yelling at you, telling you what to do, what happens to your system? You contract, you get small. That is the somatic state of shame. When someone is looking at you with full presence and full love and full compassion and is saying, oh my gosh, that makes so much, now that I know the full context of where you've been, what you're doing right now makes perfect sense. do you want to keep getting the results that you're getting? If you do, that is perfectly okay. If you don't, we might need to start making some different, really courageous, sovereign choices in alignment with our chosen values as opposed to our past programming.
Preaching from the same book there,
Yeah,
Jamie.
totally.
That's exactly what we teach, and
Yeah.
we emphasize it so much.
Mm-hmm.
And so I put it in terms of we're born with default settings,
Mm-hmm.
and shame is the main default setting that
Yeah.
comes out of complex trauma.
Yes.
And so your brain just gravitates naturally back to it subconsciously, and so it's beginning to understand that. If I'm looking at my life and listening to your life,
Mm-hmm.
so part of my healing journey had three main pieces that I had to get a lot of healing in. And so number one was I had to learn to connect to my body, listen to my body, let my body be my teacher. And that was huge when you've really, like I was attuned to my body, but only to a certain, if I was hungry, if I was tired, if I was
Totally.
achy, if I was sick.
Yeah.
But beyond that, I wasn't attuned to my body.
Mm-hmm.
I learned to ignore a lot of my body signals because I had to work hard. I had to accomplish stuff. I
Yes.
had to be this model person.
Mm-hmm.
So that was part one. Part two, I had to give myself permission to relearn what sex is,
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
and that sex was designed to be this wonderful gift that created pleasure. And so let's just kind of remove a whole bunch of rules here and just see what that's about.
Mm-hmm.
And then I had to give myself permission to understand it's okay to enjoy pleasure. It's okay to explore pleasure. It's okay. Now, you're still going to need to find boundaries because you can go into unhealthy and it gives you instant gratification, but not deep lasting pleasure. So you're still going to have to figure that out. So walk us through your journey a little bit in those kind of three key parts of your healing journey.
Yeah. I would say that for me, I think it feels true that mine went in the same order as well. The like body attunement, the beginning stages of body attunement, stepping beyond just the type of attunement, the acute attunement that can happen when your body gets loud in your direction about something, and learning the more kind of consistent, subtle attunement to just noticing your own well-being as well. Beginning to cultivate that, I think, but it is interesting because for me, it in some sense, it feels like point one and point two were sort of happening at the same time and interchanging with one another. In many ways, yeah, there's a way of like feeling my way through my own journey, and there's a way I could storytell it and say that, relearning sex came first. And then the process of developing deeper attunement with my body came second. So I think those were happening in tandem in many ways. And I think some of that is just situational. Like I wasn't, I was single and young, and, you know, curious, hungry, just like very interested in getting to know myself in the context of this activity that I either hadn't done at all, or when I did, I was doing in like deeply unconscious, self-destructive ways. And when I started becoming more attuned to my body, definitely the sex I was having was still largely unconscious and self-destructive. But I started to notice that didn't feel good. And that was what mattered. It's like I was actually having these experiences of fully presencing, both during sex and then after, and assessing how I felt, not just what felt good, but what made me feel well. How much of myself I felt like I still had access to, or how much of myself I felt like I had just like abnegated, given away, had allowed to be taken from me. And I think through just the messy baby deer process. I have said for many years in my work, especially when my first iteration of largely, almost exclusively actually working with like former evangelicals. I remember one day in a session with a client, probably 7 or 8 years ago, this phrase came out of my mouth and it landed so well with the person I was speaking to that then I just ended up finding myself saying it very frequently moving forward. That it feels like for many people when you're in that, like for me and for many people, when you're in that phase of like figuring out what sex means for you, you are having your second adolescence, but for the first time. And that's what it felt like for me, for sure. And so it was just as messy as it's supposed to be because you're figuring out who you are, what you want, and there's no way to do that without like getting into the arena of experience. And through being in the arena of experience and having a lot of sex and then like not having that much sex because I was like, I don't think that's really giving me what I want, just experimenting with both the physical act of sex and then also the necessary presencing that I needed to bring to contributing to the physical act of sex, both the presencing like in my body in the moment and also the presencing of learning how to tell the truth about what I wanted and what I knew and what I didn't want and where my boundaries were. Like the somatic experience of shifting out of codependency into sovereignty is a doozy. And one of the main areas that I think can be a profound teacher for that is in reworking and relearning your relationship to sex. And then definitely walking through that, working through that for many, many years led me into that third phase of really understanding that the experience of like pleasure and delight is so much more expansive than just this one activity or this one urge or this one facet of my existence as a human being. It belongs. It's in the soup for sure, but there's so many other ingredients in that soup. And so learning how to identify what a yes felt like in my body sexually and what a no felt like in my body sexually. For me, the path was starting to learn that and identify that gave me a somatic definition, like a wordless feeling-based definition of what yes in my body felt like and what no in my body felt like. And then it again was the courageous work of expanding it outward from there about everything. And for me personally too, what that journey looked like for me and continues to look like is about 3 years ago, I came into what feels the most true to call a remembering of myself as a polyamorous person. And that is as much an orientation for me and for many other people as being gay, being queer, being bisexual is like an innate orientation, which is that for me, it has everything to do with that third point of like not just relearning how to have sex, but relearning how to enjoy the full expansive invitation of pleasure and delight, which again, for me and my journey and my values necessitates the putting into practice of the non-attachment component of love. And that was, right around the exact same time I was like, right, I'm poly, was the exact same time I entered into codependency recovery just over 3 years ago now. And those coalesced beautifully. And this like, okay, I'm understanding the cravings of this, like these like hungry ghost part of me that believes that I won't survive unless you let me consume you. And as I started to tend to those young parts and tell those parts the truth about the fact that we could not be annihilated by loss of attachment. It's not possible. It used to be. Totally understand why you're freaking out. But I have to tell you the truth about the fact that like that can't hurt you. That started reinforcing for me necessity and deep beauty of prioritizing non-attachment in all of my relationships, but in particular my romantic and sexual relationships, where it at no point do I want someone that I claim to love to shut down their innate process, I suppose is a good word, for the continual growth and exploration in their own life. And that includes like connection with other people. And it feels very out of alignment with my values to enter into a relationship where someone is asking that of me too. So yeah, it has been a very dynamic journey, going from, being very shut down regarding my own body's impulses to then, once they started waking up, having this like, yeah, I guess the best terminology is like hungry ghost craving, just like extraordinarily anxious attachment, like coming through most of the time, to then learning how to relax into the reality of groundlessness, the reality of change, the reality of sovereignty as it exists in every person that I look at, much less love. Like that is irreducible in them. It's irreducible in me. And what feels best for me in the context of love is to honor that through surrendering to the reality of non-attachment and non-ownership.
Yeah. And just a perspective for listeners just on what you're saying. So if you look at, so you talked about kind of going through puberty as an adult. But to me, what is childhood? One way to look at it, it's curiosity and play. It's exploring.
Yeah.
It's finding out about my body, my interests, what I'm good at, what I like. That's how you get to know who you are. And so that's why people from complex trauma who've got to shut down all of that just because they got to survive, they get to 40 and they don't know who they are because they've never been allowed to explore. And then often people within very rigid type of cultures where they're told what to think and what to be, they don't know who they are because they've not been allowed to explore any of that. And so what you've done, and I love it, is give yourself permission to explore. I'm going to explore my sexuality. I'm going to explore my identity. I'm going to explore pleasure. And as I do it, I might not do everything perfectly, but I'm going to learn from each thing.
Yeah.
What feels good, what feels right, what are kind of some of the basic requirements to make this meaningful. And you gradually piece that together. And so you're going through this exploration learning.
And I am committed to regarding myself with the utmost compassion when I discover that I've engaged in things that ultimately are not for me.
Exactly. And so that to me is like, some people are going to look at what you're describing. She's breaking all the rules and doing kind of immoral stuff. And I was like, no, she's exploring. She's doing what we're all supposed to do. That's part of how we learn who we are. So I applaud you for you on that journey. So I want to move into very specifically kind of what different types of somatic things that you've learned and that you do. But before I get to that, I want to give Andy a chance to jump in, and because he's always got some really good questions.
I think that's the direction that I would be heading myself. Like I've really appreciated this so far. I think there's a lot of pieces here that are super valuable. But maybe before the somatic, one of the things I love that you're so clear on is the relationship with your body, kind of this friendship that you have, this companionship, this partnership. And so for somebody that this is like really unfamiliar as an idea, especially coming out of a shame of like, I'm not worth anything, my body's horrible. Like, what are some of the first steps that you can take, or frame or mindset that you can think about to move into this healthy relationship, healthy friendship with your body, with something that maybe we've treated as a tool or trash for our entire life?
Yeah, it's an excellent question. That question is exactly why I created an online course 4 years ago. Because there's so many different potential points of entry. And And I do deeply believe that learning how to like just get yourself on the path and begin to take the journey can be taught, for lack of a better word, somewhat formulaically, as far as teaching people what the most generative dispositions to have in their own direction are going to be for beginning to walk this out. And I would say the thing that really kind of built my career is my particular conception of the body as a person. In fact, the name of my online course is Your Body is a Person. And this methodology that I created called Personified Embodiment, I think actually this like extraordinarily simple but potent shift of learning how to speak about and regard your physical container of living matter as an animate living being as opposed to an inanimate object by way of starting to practice shifting your language from calling the body an it to calling the body he, she, or they, whichever one feels truest and best for you, starts to change everything. Because when you start beginning to regard your body as a he, she, or they rather than an it, you start to recognize that like conversation is happening. The relational principles now apply. And learning to be in conversation, and in some ways the best word, the word that feels truest to use often is negotiation, learning how to be in continual negotiation with the record keeper of your living matter, while you are the truth teller to the record keeper of your living matter, necessitates being in this dance of conversation and this flow of negotiation where it cannot, a concept in my course is, among many other concepts, is this idea that when we're raised with this sort of fundamentalist ideology in any form, cultural, religious, or otherwise, the water we're swimming in is to regard our body as an object that we should figure out how to be in control of. A lot of times when we start to come out of that mindset and practice and wake up from that, we start operating under the assumption that now they get to win all the rounds. And so this record keeper, this memory holder, just needs to be in charge and constantly driving the car. So every one of my traumas I identify with, every one of my triggers I just listen to and I fold in on my, like, I think that's a vital doorway to walk through. I think in order to develop self-trust with this record keeper who loves you and is just trying to tell you the truth about what's being held here, they have to learn that you're listening and that you're interested in regarding them and regarding their information as wisdom and important to you. So I do think it's vital to pendulum swing for a time to the other side of letting your body win a few rounds, so to speak. But then ultimately, what I think the path deserves to look like for both your well-being and the well-being of your living matter is learning how to dance the dance of, just like in any other relationship, it is never the case that one person is always correct about everything. There is this, there's this energy that's created in the space of listening and regarding in between two people. And so learning how to, and again, this is what I teach in depth in my course. That's why I created it. It's like 15 hours long because there's a lot to teach here, but the core principles for developing that communication and that ability to regard the signals, communication, the language that your body is speaking. The four main principles I teach in the course are self-compassion, self-curiosity, self-communication, how to build on the compassion and curiosity to get into consistent flows of communication. And then from that, experiencing sustained self-connection, which just looks like continually practicing these, definitely tools, practices, etc., but mostly just practicing the art of changing your language and how you regard your living matter, because it matters so much. If you are calling your body an it, they're a lamp on a table, they're a blender in your kitchen. They don't have anything to tell you about anything. And in fact, like, the only path of success forward is if you figure out how to hack or control or win in some way over what they might be doing. And then that trickles down into like how our medical system regards bodies, as if they, you know, start to get loud, they're breaking, they're doing something wrong, as opposed to, again, another concept in my course is this idea that a loud body is a kind body, because they're trying to get your attention about like what is stored here and how that correlates with like what got skewed in development that wants to be set right. Like they are a spiritual technology and they are trying to wake you up so that you can experience full presence in this lifetime. And none of that is possible to find out and work with them unless you start regarding them as alive. And we don't call alive beings it. We regard them as he, she, they. We sometimes even, like, some people call their cars her or him, you know. So I think there's this necessity, the simple pointed answer to your question, to land on in that longer answer, is reanimate your living matter. Reanimate, give them, well, you're not giving them, they have one, a personality, a memory, a communication style. Learn how to regard them as alive and begin wondering what they have to tell you that, I promise you, is for your own good. Their whole reason for existing is to try and love you and save you and make you as well as you possibly can. That is why they're here. That is why you are in a body. You don't have a body. It's supposed to feel good to be in a body. It's like that's like the secret. I think that doesn't deserve to be a secret. I reject the belief that consciousness animates into living matter so that you experience like chronic dissatisfaction and then chronic disease until you eventually die way younger than I think is appropriate. Like that can't be what we're here for. There is something more sacred than that going on, and they can tell you about it. That's why they're here. They exist to tell you about it. So I'm gonna stop talking now because I could, this is why the course is 15 hours long. I could talk about, it's funny because as you're asking the question, I was like, I wonder how I'm going to answer this today. And there you go. Cause I clearly, like, this is the thing I am most passionate about. Before we started recording, we were talking a little bit and I reflected to Tim that, what feels really true for me and how I understand my life's journey, both personally and professionally, is that, you know, I got curious about my body's experience in fundamentalist religion. So I started talking to her and getting to know her, and I fell madly in love with her. And then I kept following her as she kept and has continued to teach me about the nature of the body, about the nature of bodies. And that is why I have arrived at this conclusion that the body is a spiritual technology, and they are here to wake us up.
But I also really love the relationship coming in of the body that's caring for you that you're describing, and I'd love to hear more about that. But before I go there, you talked earlier kind of about that familiar state of shame, but then also like the nervous system. And so, and I love how you describe your identity, with the consciousness animated into matter, but this relaxed state of gratitude. And so, could you speak a little bit about kind of moving from that familiar state of shame, moving from maybe being kind of stuck in a survival response to being able to find this place, this relaxed state of gratitude?
Yeah. It's vital for thriving and flourishing. It's vital. And it necessitates extraordinary courage, because as we were talking about earlier, what generally tends to get programmed into living matter, which their whole job is to keep you alive. I mean, it's the brain's job too. They just go about it differently somewhat. If they have this blueprint kind of programmed into them through those early, largely preverbal experiences that form the unconscious mind, which is your fascia, actually your connective tissue is your unconscious mind. Although I had a teacher recently who said, how did he say it? He was like, it is that and then some, essentially. Like there's also like the unified field, you know, like, and I was like, yeah, that's right. But if it is true that we've got this, most of us have this kind of blueprint of shame going on, what the body who loves you and is trying to save you is under the impression of is that, like, if we stay here, we will be safe in perpetuity. And unfortunately, what happens, hopefully, as we grow is that we would like to live. We would like to not just survive in this, it's not known, it's not controlled, but we can convince ourselves, and largely in modernity, we can actually live our days out like that, where we do not open our hearts, we do not engage in vulnerability, we don't even see or interact with another human person. We scroll, we work, we dissociate, we entertain ourselves in ways that don't necessitate, the opening of our hearts, the potential, the risking of relationship, and the inevitable loss that will come from connection, because even if, like, connection in this lifetime is never dropped, eventually someone will leave their body. And so it's deeply understandable that our bodies have this invested interest in wanting us to stay closed. That's so understandable. And many spiritual teachers will tell you that you need to figure out how to, like, I don't know, be mean to them about that, or like transcend, like get away from them because they're stupid, or I don't know, I'm paraphrasing. But again, I love them more than that. I think they're wiser than that. And also, like, again, why do we have one unless they're trying to, like, teach us something, if so in order to go from that state, that sort of default setting of shame, into wherever it is that we would like to go, number one, we have to know where it is that we would like to go. And the processing of figuring out, like, the maturation process of identifying your own values is vital, because in identifying what your values are, you're essentially identifying the alternative ways that you would like to feel. And then once you've identified the alternative ways that you would like to feel, for better or for worse, what comes next, and is what is absolutely unavoidable, is deep courage, is learning how to presence yourself in your own life. There's so many teachers with so many tools, and it's like such an exciting time to be alive, that, like, more and more people are waking up to this path and this process. And there's myriad ways to become a more embodied person, but it is functionally, that's what we're talking about when we're talking about becoming more embodied. It is the path of learning how to, when you feel the tendency to close, and maybe listen to the fear-based memory that is encoded here. What is most needed, and can't happen right away, so patience and compassion for the process that it's going to take is necessary. But ultimately, this patient and compassionate and devoted process of continually telling your body, that record keeper, the truth about what you know about now. And in fact, there's a lesson in my course that walks people through, like, this exercise of what to do when you experience a trigger. And the process necessitates, like, anchoring yourself inside of where you are in linear time, and speaking compassionately to your nervous system that is, like, firing on all cylinders trying to make you safe. And so they're saying run or shut down. They're saying go sympathetic or go vasovagal shut down, like, do something to get the fuck out of here. You're essentially going, thank you so much for telling me what you think the strategy is here. And you know what? You're not totally wrong. That strategy has absolutely worked before. You are brilliant. That's how we got here. You driving the car is how we got to this point, and enacting that strategy is how we got here. I'm not kicking you out of the car. I'm not firing you from your job. I'm simply asking you to trust me, and maybe, like, get in the passenger seat, back seat. Can you let me drive right now? I promise you, we are safe enough for you to believe me that we can have a different experience. And from that point, now that you've identified the alternative ways that you would like to feel, developing that trust between yourself and this living, animate, record-keeping being of your body is how they become willing to literally, on, like, a nervous system level, relax into believing you, that beginning to move in the direction of the chosen and identified alternative feeling that you would like to have, that is actually safe to do now. Yeah, I guess that's my answer to your question.
Love that. I want to ask one more follow-up before I let Tim ask some more of his somatic questions. So, and this is, well, I know the direction you're going to answer this, but I'm going to ask the question anyway, is, can I do this alone? Can I begin this just by watching YouTube videos or reading a book? Or do I need a teacher or a community?
It's so funny because I'm like, I don't even know what my answer is. You're like, I think I know. Well, I think you do know where I will ultimately land with this, which is like, I would say start wherever it feels most accessible to you to start, and trust that the teacher will come, trust that the community will come, trust that the organizing principle of the universe that is resonance will do its work on your behalf and bring to you the individuals and or communities that are working this out and walking this out for themselves. Will find you. You will find them, because healing has to happen in the context of community and of connection and of relationship, because that is where the wound lives. I was just actually listening to a podcast yesterday. Joe Dispenza is on Rick Rubin's podcast, and he's talking about, Rick just like directly asked him this question about whether or not Joe believed that like these astounding, like just mind-blowing, like, logic defying metrics that they're seeing, results that they're getting from these 7-10 day immersive retreats that they're doing with large groups of people. Rick was like, do you believe, not even just believe, does the data bear out that you would get the same results if you were doing like one-on-one stuff with people? And he's like, no. It has to happen. It happens best in the context of relationship, for a number of reasons. But also, I would hate for anyone to hear or interpret that answer as, well, then if I don't have a teacher, if I don't have a facilitator, or I don't currently have the resources to hire someone as a teacher or facilitator, if I don't have a community around me, or if my family's on board with, there goes that for me. This is why, again, very exciting time to be alive, because things like YouTube videos and podcasts and online courses and the ability to like follow people on social media that you might find resonance with, like those are excellent places to start. Those are wonderful doorways, and they cannot be the ultimate destination, because living matter needs to heal inside of the context of relationship with other living matter for that specific experience of like co-regulation and resonance. And this is exactly why so much of my work has moved offline. This is exactly why, after being a somatic facilitator for almost a decade and doing work largely at a distance with people through like online coaching, phone calls, various things like that, both individual and groups, I felt this deep need to move in the direction of getting my license as a massage therapist, as a body worker, where I am participating in the process of attunement and allowing the body that I'm working with, whoever's on my table, allowing their body to come into attunement and seek and find resonance with the unconditional positive regard that I am allowing to flow through both my presence and my touch. And the results that not that it's about like the metrics of results, but I will say like the potency maybe of what I see and what people articulate that their experience is in this space of my hands-on in-person work, is the potency is very specific and in many ways exponential to the potency of something that's done at a distance. But start wherever it feels most accessible, most possible to start. And I think the final thing I'll say about that is, maybe this is totally unsurprising me, like trust your body. Like to speak to what Tim mentioned earlier, like this long-term process of kind of unconsciously learning how to deny your own instincts and impulses and intuition, that doesn't go away. For like, it can go dormant, but you never lose it. And I think once you start waking up, once the desire starts waking up within you to walk this kind of path, to have this type of relationship with your body, the intuitive pings and nudges of, you open up Instagram and there's this person who's offering this thing, and there's like a deep resonance within you with that, like learning how to not over question that, learning how to not shut that down, learning how to just go, I'm going to take the next step that is available in front of me right now. And I'm going to trust that if I show up with my full presence, I will get what I need from this. And then the next step will reveal itself to me after that.
You are a very articulate, wise woman there, Jamie. It's been a pleasure to listen. So the remainder of our time, I want to kind of do body work. And I think it's important for people to realize, I think there's kind of three directions in body work. So we talked about pre-verbal trauma being stored in the body. So we get a lot of clients that, how do I get in touch with the trauma in my body? So they've got headaches, they've got TMJ, they've got all kinds of different body pains and sensations that they've gone to doctors for years, but it hasn't helped. And it's trauma stored in the body. So that's part one, is helping them kind of get in touch with their body and the trauma stored in their body. The second is, when you look at an infant, much of emotional regulation is done through body work. Parents rock them and pat them and hug them and cradle them and kiss them. And there's just so much of emotional attunement that then happens because of body sensation and safety and connection that happens through that. And so a big part for people dealing with trauma is emotional regulation, learning tools for emotional regulation. And because they get dysregulated so easy every time they get triggered. And so body work, like art therapy, music therapy, dance therapy, pet therapy, on and on, it happens. And then the third piece is, to me, what you've talked a lot about. It's learning to relate to your body and listen to it and dialogue with it, because it's always telling you stuff, either about your emotional stuff, about your external world, about what it's picking up. And so your vagus nerve has got your, not just perception, it's got neuroception and interoception. And that neuroception is sensing all of it's designed to pick up stuff in your body's hearing that. So people need ongoing things that help them listen to their body, get better at understanding their body, exploring how to listen to their body. So you really got three functions in the recovery journey that the body plays a key role in the healing. So can you speak to very, very practical things that people can do as far as starting to get in touch with where trauma is stored in their body? Practical somatic exercises. So now there's earthing and ice water baths and yoga and martial arts, and on and on and on it goes. And there's tremendous amount of research being done, but I think you've done a ton of work in that area as well. And then just practical daily things to stop and listen to my body. So.
Yeah. Well, as you pointed out, there are so many points of entry to the path. And I think that's really exciting because that I think the fact that there are an enormous amount of points of entry helps to, how do I say this? Like that reinforces the existence of intuition, that like there's so many things that like I could say, or anyone else could say about like what has worked for me or what I've seen worked with so many people. And fundamentally, when you get all the way down to the core of it, following your own impulses, following your own curiosity, learning how to feel safe enough to trust what is registering to your system as interesting and delightful and appealing is vital. In fact, like if anyone were to follow a prescribed path instead, arguably what you're trying to do wouldn't actually be happening, because there would be no coming back to self and getting in touch with self in that way. And again, like, what an incredibly exciting time to be alive, because there are so many teachers, there are so many resources, there are so many outlets for people who are waking up to the relationship with their own bodies and therefore life itself that they would prefer to have, and are turning their experience into a technology or into a teaching that then they emit out to, exist as a point of potential resonance that other people can find. And so maybe I'll just speak to, for me, really practical, simple tools, like everyday tools. The first thing that comes to mind, well, actually the first thing that came up was that I felt the impulse to want to say dance, because like dancing, in fact, Marion Woodman, who is someone that, again, early on in my journey 3 years ago of coming into this more kind of sovereign, coming out of codependent functioning and into a more sovereign, non-attached way of ideating love and expressing love. I got really into her talks for a little while there. And I remember coming across something she said kind of as an aside in a lecture she was giving once, that she has a daily practice of dance. And that it's like, it is her most, like, and this is a paraphrase, I don't think she said it this way, but it felt like what she was insinuating is it's like her most potent and important spiritual practice. I would say that like authentic movement, like that expresses itself through like ecstatic dance or 5 rhythms or those sorts of like movement practices to music, whether it's alone or with a group of people, has been just extraordinarily reconnective for me. But then as I felt that sense of wanting to answer with dance, what then kind of emerged or bloomed out of that was this feeling of just wanting to answer even more foundationally with the self-permission for authentic movement, period. Because bodies are, this is something that comes through very frequently, especially particularly when I'm sober sitting for people on psilocybin journeys. I have I could talk about psilocybin for another 2 hours specifically, but one of the things that was true for me, and that I notice is true when people are on like a full dose intentional ceremonial journey of psilocybin, is very often the body wants to move and unwind. Even something I learned in my craniosacral training, like there's like a whole process of unwinding the deeply held, like tightly wound patterns in your fascia that have grown and strengthened over time as compensatory responses to your environment and the personality structure you developed. Like various different ways of allowing the body to move freely as opposed to exist rigidly is extremely important, because there are things that we don't actually have to like know the things that the body is working out and releasing regarding like the trauma that has been stored there, for those loops to complete themselves, for those processes, for what was, trauma is, essentially unresolved impact. And movement alone, the moving of an expression of an expulsion of energy in the physical system, can close some of those loops and resolve some of what has been unresolved without us even needing to know what any of it is, without us needing to verbally process it or sit, in an EMDR or talk therapy session to be able to like know what's going on. The body has their own innate wisdom. They can just release. What is needed is for us to do the internal work of releasing ourselves into the permission of not needing to move around the world so appropriately anymore. And so just ways in which, like, I don't know, movement is just so vital for this. Like, you cannot get around it, especially in modernity. So much of our relationship to our bodies is very stuck and still and seated and constrained, and our bodies really, really, really need to move. I think another, let's see what comes through. I think another piece that I would say is really vital, is, oh yeah, okay. So everyone compensates differently, and it's somewhere along the the spectrum of upregulated to downregulated, sympathetic response to vasovagal response. And when there is a response of kind of what seems to be like a depressed, like when that's the compensatory response, is like a dissociated, depressed, that might look like someone is slowing down, but it's not a relaxed, regulated slowing down. There is a buildup of frenetic energy that is swirling and looping in the system, and the body, that's the freeze state. The body freezes. When a body is in a freeze state as a response to a trauma or a trigger, it's not that like things have profoundly slowed down here, it's that they're not able to be expelled and expressed. So it's funny that what I'm finding in this moment is my second answer in addition to like movement is also, second answer is slow down. Learning how to largely and first and foremost like slow down the thinking mind, learning how to become an observer of your own thoughts, your own thinking mind. And so as I'm working through my response here, I would say movement and meditation are apparently what I'm trying to get to, are excellent places to start. Movement to be able to release the stored energy, and meditation to be able to develop that trust with your living matter, where they know it is safe to slow down, that there's no active threat on the horizon right in this very moment, and we can slow down and notice our breathing and take in the sensory information in our environment, and I can reinforce to you that we're safe to do that. And then there's just like unlimited mountains of data on like the benefits of meditation, just psychologically, physiologically. I mean, in many ways, that is like the core of what someone like Joe Dispenza's work is built on. What meditation essentially is it's represencing yourself with your living matter, without the thinking mind and the busy mental chatter being the thing that's in the way of your ability to represence yourself in your body. So I would say those are two really wonderful and accessible to everyone places to start, is like start moving your body authentically more, and start slowing, maybe for like, as I'm a huge fan of law of attraction, and as Esther, who transmits on behalf of Abraham and law of attraction, says, like, just 15 minutes a day, just 15 minutes a day, just start there. Just like basically like reset your vibrational frequency by just like tuning everything out, slowing down, coming back to presence.
Yeah. So if I can just again sum up, because to me it's excellent stuff, but the big thing about complex trauma is it's too painful to be present in the present. Mm-hmm. So I want to be anywhere but the present. So I dissociate. But dissociation looks like I'm relaxing, but I'm actually freezing.
Yes.
I'm in my sympathetic or dorsal vagal system, and so it's not true rest. It's actually frenzy that can't resolve itself. Yeah. So what happens with that is I lose the ability to be present to myself, not just to my environment. I don't want to be present to myself because I can't resolve anything. And so what you're talking about with the meditation and all this body work is, it's really at the very foundational thing, learning to be present to yourself.
Yeah, that's right.
All of you, your body, your mind, your emotions, your spirit, all of those pieces you learn to listen to slow down and to hear and to be present in the present. And that it takes time to learn that. That's definitely not a culturally accepted thing to do because we're busy. And our value comes from productivity, not from sitting in silence.
Yeah.
But it's such an important thing. And then movement actually can help us get into that state. Breath work can help us get into that state. And so one of the most sacred parts of my day is I walk every morning for about 10 kilometers in nature. And I love it. That's my time. That's where I can decompress. That's where I can just be. But there's movement, there's rhythm, there's all of that happening. And so I think, to me, what I want people to hear is to start this journey, you don't need necessarily a whole bunch of technical information. Just start with learning to breathe again, learning to move again, learning to be present to yourself. Yeah. Develop little things that work for you, that help. And just one other thing, just kind of what you were talking earlier about, the movement piece. So what they found is with an animal that, like a deer that's scared, it goes into flight mode. So it gets all this cortisol, adrenaline, it goes in and it gets to safety. And once it's into safety, it gets behind a bush. And then what does it do? It's like a dog. It tenses all of its muscles and shakes, takes a deep breath. And what's it doing? It's releasing all the cortisol, all that pent up energy. And it's resolving the situation, and the nervous system is going back to its normal, healthy state. And so there's so much that the body wants to help us resolve just by us doing things that help it release some of that pent-up energy. And we don't necessarily even know what memory was or anything. The body's just trying to guide us and help us begin to resolve some of that stuff. So
yes. Yeah.
This has been fantastic, Jamie. You are extremely knowledgeable, and it's been wonderful. Andy's just going to ask you to kind of give us a little bit of information of where people can learn more.
Great.
Yeah. And so before we do that, I just want to get a last word from you, for somebody who's listening who feels disconnected or broken. What would you want them to hear right now?
This actually, the silent spaciousness before I speak and give an answer in my own voice, which I know that doesn't make excellent podcasting, which is why I didn't leave as much space as I really wanted to leave. But my simplest answer to that question is themselves, because that is available to you, to everyone, to anyone right now. It is somatically complicated to get to. It can feel distressing. It can feel dangerous until it doesn't. And the only way that you get to that point of it no longer feeling distressing or dangerous or unfamiliar or uncomfortable is through compassionate, consistent practice. But she's there, he's there, they're there. They cannot ever go fully offline until death, really. And so I think maybe as I'm saying this, what I would want people to hear is, to put it quite simply, like, there is no such thing as too late on this journey of reconnecting to oneself, because they're always here. They are eternally faithful to the sacred mission of waking you up to how good it is supposed to feel to be here, to be all here in a body, in the human experience, out here, as Abraham would say, out here on the leading edge of, creating the experience that you most want to have, sensationally, that you most want to have. And there are necessary, painful things often to look at and to feel first before we can get to, well, I'll say it this way. We very often have to expand our capacity, like intentionally expand our capacity to feel what is uncomfortable and difficult to feel first before our capacity can remain and continue to expand into allowing ourselves to feel what is deeply pleasurable to feel, what is deeply satisfying to feel. And the invitation to that journey never gets revoked. It never goes away. It doesn't even diminish. There's no such thing as that being further away than just deciding to presence oneself to oneself right here, right now. So I think that's what I want to kind of leave your listeners with, is that's what I most deeply believe. It's available to everyone and anyone at any time.
Excellent.
I love that. And before we close, is there anything that you're currently working on that you'd like to share with our listeners, and where can people find your work?
Mm-hmm. Easiest way to find me and to remain in touch with me and what I'm doing and what I'm continually working on releasing online is my Instagram. My handle is just Jamie Lee Finch. I also have a website, jamieleefinch.com. I have a membership space as well where we have monthly calls. We've been going for over 5 years now, which is incredible. It's like a really core, beautiful group of people who are just enacting this process, with one another, and learning in the context of like connection and community. Link for that can be found on my website and on my Instagram. And as far as what I'm working on right now, interesting answer to that question is that I'm sort of reworking, as in re-releasing. I've sort of re-released my online course as my work has moved more to prioritize hands-on and in-person, one-on-one and group work. It feels even more important to me now to remind people, to point people in the direction of this like foundational, both financially and logistically accessible resource that is, making it taught me all of these things, which is ironic. I don't quite know how to like understand that because I kind of knew them, but then in creating the like 30 lessons and 15 hours of content in this course, and you get a physical workbook when you order it, like I released it 4 years ago. And something about this current moment of moving my work more directly working with bodies, it's hard to explain, but it just feels so incredibly important to me to remind people, to offer it to people as like an excellent, truly excellent place to begin in learning just these core foundational, complex, which is why it's 15 hours, but like absolutely accessible to everyone, concepts of how to start this journey of reconnection with self. I also have an online workshop that I just recently, the course is kind of a re-release. This workshop is a first release it's a recording of a live workshop that myself and my social media manager, Erin, we did a number of workshops, or we did this workshop a number of times of teaching people essentially how to specifically apply these concepts of like presencing to oneself in the particular context of your relationship to social media and technology. Basically, how to help support yourself become unaddicted to the way in which your phone my phone has tended to kind of like have a stranglehold of my attention. So it's a workshop about retaining your sovereignty of consciousness and therefore your somatic sovereignty as well. And links to both of those, you can navigate to those via my Instagram and also my website. The course is called Your Body as a Person. The workshop is called Log Off and Tune Into Your Body. And then the last thing I'll say is also on my website, if anyone is interested in having the conversation of what it could look like to work with me one-on-one, whether they are local to one of the kind of 2 places I live right now, or they're interested in doing online coaching, which is the thing I've been doing for almost 10 years now. I do have kind of perpetually open, very limited availability for one-on-one work with people. But anyone can submit an application for that at any time. It's very brief and very simple. And that is also available to people as well, that one-on-one work too. So I have tons of options. And I trust that if any of those are resonant with people, that they will be able to find me easily and effortlessly. And I welcome and invite that freely.
Well, Jamie, thank you for being here with us today.
Mm-hmm. I just remembered one thing I always forget to mention. I have a podcast too. My podcast is called Experiential Anatomy. So you can search for that on any of your podcast apps. And then also this did remind me too, I meant, and I have it on my notes here, listeners of your podcast, I wanted to offer a gift to make it even more accessible. If they are interested in the online course, they can get 20% off just using the code TIM at checkout. So I'm so glad I remembered to say that and that I didn't hop off here not remembering to say that. It's like the one thing I came into this, I was like, don't forget the code. So yes, they have a podcast. You can listen to that and then code for the course as well. So now I am done. I am complete.
So thank you for that, Jamie. And we'll include some of those links in our description and the show notes as well. And so I just want to thank you for your clarity, for your wisdom, the warmth. You have this force and empowered way of being and speaking. And so thank you for bringing your full self into this conversation. And for those listening, we hope that something that Jamie shared invites you back into relationship with your own body as a person to love. And what a helpful reminder that if you've carried shame or disconnection, that your body's not the enemy, that it is trying to speak with you, and they've never stopped loving you.
Yeah.
And so as always, take care of yourselves and remember that healing isn't about becoming someone new. It's about coming home to who you've always been.
Thank you both so much.
Thank you for joining us on the Time with Tim podcast. If you'd like to share your own experiences or have questions, feel free to email us at podcasts@timfletcher.ca. Want to learn more about complex trauma? Subscribe to Tim Fletcher's YouTube channel for past lectures and his Friday night Tim Talks. You can also connect with us on Instagram, Facebook, LinkedIn, and TikTok. Looking for more support? We offer programs and courses to help with healing complex trauma and recovering from addictions. Visit timfletcher.ca to learn more or send us an inquiry. We're here to support you. Until we meet again, take care and thank you for letting us be a part of your healing journey.